In this video, we're going to talk about absolute values, and then once we define them and explain a little bit about them, we're going to include them in equations and inequalities. And what we'll find is that they give us another way to represent compound inequalities that we saw in previous videos. Okay, so the first thing is just the general idea about an absolute value. The main thing to remember is that an absolute value is the distance between whatever's inside and zero. Okay, so the absolute value of a number is the distance between that number and zero. Now that might seem kind of like a weird definition, but that's all it is. So, and absolute values are represented by these straight bars on either side of the number. So if I wanted the absolute value of 6, for instance, well, that's equal to 6 because, as you'll know, the distance between 0 and 6 on a number line is 6. There's 6 units in there, right? So the distance is the absolute value. The absolute value of -8 is, of course, 8 because the distance here between -8 and 0 is 8, okay? And the absolute value of 0, of course, is 0 because the distance between anything and itself is 0, okay? A couple things to point out. Absolute values are always either positive or 0. You can never have a negative value as the output of an absolute value, okay? You can have negatives going in, but you cannot have negatives coming out. We can also use variables inside of absolute values. And so we could just put an x in there, something like the absolute value of x is equal to 5. Well, here we're looking to solve an equation. We're looking to find all values you could plug in for x to get out an absolute, or to get a value of 5 out of the absolute value. Well, there are two such numbers, one of them being 5 and the other one being -5. Okay, when you take the absolute value of 5, you get 5. When you take the absolute value of -5, you also get 5. So it yields two different answers. Okay, one is x equals 5. The other one is x equals -5. The order doesn't really matter here, okay? You could write that more succinctly, and sometimes we'll do that and write it as plus or minus 5, put a positive and a negative, this positive negative combination symbol in front of the 5. I would accept either one on these. Actually, with this, you do want to put this in a solution set because we are solving an equation. And so the solution set technically is the set containing positive or -5, and so you could just put it in as a plus minus 5, or you could write them separately. It doesn't really matter. To me, you could do -5, comma 5. I believe on your My Math Lab homework, it's going to want the comma separated answer like this on the bottom, okay? Okay, so that's just a simple way to represent an absolute value equation. We can have other more complicated absolute value equations when the absolute value is not the only thing on that side. There's other things. So something like 3 times the absolute value of x minus 8 is equal to, I don't know, let's say 17 or something like that. I don't know. Okay, so on this one, I need to solve for the x. I need to get that absolute value by itself and then work through this plus or minus idea, okay? So I'm going to add an 8 to both sides. So just like I would be solving for an x, I'm going to solve for the absolute value of x. Add the 8 to get rid of that. 17 plus 8 is 25. And then I'm going to divide out the 3, just like I was solving for x. absolute value of x is equal to 25/3. Now you could turn it into a mixed number or a decimal. I don't think that's necessary. The fraction is just fine. And then, like I said before, all we're doing here is we're trying to figure out what values of x will make an absolute value of 25/3. Well, the answer is both positive 25/3 and negative 25/3 because they both have a distance from 0 of 25/3. Okay, so the final answer here is x equals plus or minus 25/3, and so your solution set, and I'll write it out like they would want it on my math lab, it's going to be negative 25/3 comma 25/3. Okay, so this is a good solution set that you would type in on my math lab. I'm pretty sure they will want that in fraction form and list it out with both values there. Okay, so double check, make sure the instructions say to do it that way, but I'm pretty certain that's how it's going to look in the end. Okay, now these absolute value equations can also include more inside the absolute value, but the process that we use is going to be very similar. Okay, so let's look at another example. Let's take the absolute value of 2x minus 7 is equal to 18. Okay, well in this one, I don't know what the 2x minus 7 is going to be, but I know that whatever goes into the absolute value must come out as a positive 18. So whatever's inside has to be equal to either negative 18 or positive 18 in order for the absolute value of it to be 18. And so for that reason, the stuff on the inside has to be equal, just like we did here. The stuff on the inside is positive or negative the other side of this equation. So we could write it as 2x minus 7 is equal to 18, or 2x minus 7 is equal to negative 18. It's one of the two. So the stuff in the absolute values is either equal to 18 or negative 18. That's how the absolute value of it becomes 18, right? Now, each of these equations must be solved, and then the combination put into a solution set. So this first one, I add the 7, I get 2x is equal to 25, divide by 2, and x is equal to 25 halves, okay? Or we could put that in decimal form, it's 12.5, 12.5. Here, I would add the 7 to both sides. 2x is equal to negative 11, divide out the 2, and x is negative 11 over 2, or negative 5.5. Then these two numbers go into the solution set because they're both solutions. If you think about this, and let me just take one of these for example. This one in decimal form, what I say, that's 12.5. If I put 12.5 into this equation, 2 times 12.5 is 25. 25 minus 7 is 18, and the absolute value of 18 is 18. If I were to put negative, what's that, negative 5.5 in here, negative 5.5 times 2 is negative 11, minus 7 is negative 18, and I take negative 18, take the absolute value of negative 18, I'll get 18. So either of these are both solutions. And so the solution set is going to be the combination of these two numbers, the negative 11 over 2 and 25 over 2, right? So again, this is how the solution will be represented on my math lab.